how do you explain the referendum? Now, again, I was not one of the proponents of this, so let me see if I can be reasonably fair. I think you can only make any, if you look at the literature that's circulating out there, you might have seen some of the handouts that are going around. Also, there was, if you go on the City Commission agenda way back when the referendum was proposed to the City Commission, there were a number of justifications that were proposed by the proponents. I think the one thing to keep in mind is that the discussion is so complicated because this is an initiative process. This idea was not generated out of a rational, long-term sort of planning process. This is the expression of the public's power to impose a vote, basically, on the elected officials of the city. Initiatives are based on emotion. They're not based on reason or rationality. So, in my reading of all the justifications for, and there are many, many justifications, it's sort of, it's like Google world. All right? So you go on Google, you know where you want to go, basically. If I'm a proponent and I want to have a referendum through the initiative process, I know where I want to go. I want to generate as much enthusiasm for my cause as I possibly can. I go on Google and I come up with a gazillion different reasons why building heights raise problems, and why not having the building heights at the level that I want is such a terrible problem in the city of Lake Worth. So one has to filter all of these arguments through this sense of emotion. And you also have to accept a certain world frame of mind, which it isn't necessarily mine. Hopefully I'm not going to totally misstate it here, but this is the frame of mind for the referendum. First of all, these are the kind of principles. Lake Worth is and should permanently be a low-rise community. Now, low-rise isn't defined, but presumably it's 45 feet to 35 feet. That's what low-rise is. Our development pattern is characterized by cottages. All right, so we're a low-rise cottage community, and as part of the justification that was submitted to the City Commission, there was an article in the New York Times last year, kind of an architecture section, which was a very nice article about some of these little bungalows, little houses that are being restored close to the downtown, the little wood frame houses on the 25-foot lots, basically. So that's kind of the imagery that was presented, that Lake Worth, that's the quality of life and the character of life that we want to preserve in the city of Lake Worth, low-rise cottage community. But although low-rise is never really defined. Okay, the second principle is that this quality of life is imminently threatened by two forces. One is developers. The developers are out there, and speculators, and they are going to come here and they are going to destroy our cottages, and they're going to replace them with high-rise buildings. Now, high-rise is apparently anything over 30 feet, 35 feet, or 45 feet. That's a high-rise. Again, it's not defined. The second problem that we have why Lake Worth is threatened is corrupt and or spineless politicians. All right, so we have several. Sorry, we have politicians. They are corrupt and they are spineless. They are either in the pay of the developers, or they are so weak-willed that they cannot withstand the developers. So the people united will never be defeated. The people who, the voters, must impose upon those spineless politicians rules that they cannot ignore. And so that's why we would need to have an amendment to the charter, because it's the constitution of the city and it can't be changed by, you can't just have 3 votes at a city commission meeting changing the rules. So those are the two problems that are required that this, and it's an imminent threat. It's not like someday the developers and the spineless politicians are going to lead to the destruction of our quality of life. It's now. You really have to get out there and protect the city against those forces. And then, again, I guess the third principle is the only way to combat the developers and the crooked, spineless politicians is to tie their hands by enshrining these standards in the city plan. You may recall about 2-3 years ago, there was a constitutional amendment proposed in the state of Florida called hometown democracy. And that was a major effort. It went on for years. It finally, it was a statewide referendum. They gathered several 100,000 votes, got it on the city, on the statewide ballot. It was defeated in 2010. What the hometown democracy would have done was it would have required that required a charter event, basically a referendum on every change to a comprehensive plan. It's kind of what our referendum sounds like is a mini version of hometown democracy, which isn't really a surprise because the main proponent of hometown democracy statewide lives in Manalapan and was quite influential. The year before that, those of us who've been here a while may recall, Lake Worth had a charter referendum, which would have been a mini version of hometown democracy. It was going to require that Lake Worth comprehensive plan could not be amended without a referendum. And that referendum would apply throughout the city of Lake Worth, was defeated here in the city of Lake Worth. Lake Worth was one of a couple of test cities. Hometown democracy statewide picked a couple of communities in the state as their test cases for popular support for the statewide hometown democracy. One of which was, I think, St. Petersburg Beach. One was Lake Worth, Yankeetown, which is up in North Florida. Those were the three communities that they picked. This version was passed and defeated in Lake Worth, but passed in St. Petersburg Beach. It caused an enormous problem for that town. Litigation, lawyers, costs. It was a major mess for the city, although they did pass it over there. And was subsequently repealed in the city of St. Petersburg Beach. So the worldview is important to keep in mind in trying to sort out all the claims that are made, because again, it's sort of like spraying it at the wall, you know, and whatever sticks, something's going to stick. If you have such diverse perspectives on quality of life in the community, and everybody is free to define your quality of life the way that you want. And so proponents, in my opinion, appear to be throwing every possible argument that they could possibly find out there and hoping that it'll appeal to the diversity of opinion about quality of life and the character of the community that you want to maintain here in the city of Lake Worth. So, just some examples. There are so many arguments, I mean, that have been proposed to support the referendum that I can't possibly go through them all. But I'll point out a couple of them. Increases the tax base, this is a quote, increases the tax base without burdening city services. Well, I don't know, there's no evidence whatsoever presented that this referendum, again, you're just talking about a 3-block strip from the traffic circle to the bridge. It somehow is going to increase the tax base in the city of Lake Worth. Doesn't make any sense. That the massive amount, the assumption is that you're going to have these high-rise buildings, high-rise, but now, remember, you can't get anything in Lake Worth east of Dixie more than 65 feet. It's a 6-story building. That's a high-rise building in the city of Lake Worth. We are not Hallandale. You know, you're not, 40-story or Miami Beach, 40 or 50-story buildings lining the water. But in this context, that's what a high-rise building is. So there are all these assumptions about, okay, picture a high-rise building with the shadow. If you live on the north side of a high-rise building and the sun obviously is more or less to the south, the shadow will cover your property and you'll be denied light. And if you have a great concentration of these high-rise buildings, they will crowd out the fresh air. They will interfere with the breezes. And these are some of the arguments that are being made. You have to take that, just evaluate it yourself, whether you think that has any kind of weight. Protecting the Gulf Stream, that is one of my favorites. I have I have a long experience representing failed projects on the Gulf Stream, unfortunately. I have represented several of the owners of the Gulf Stream over the last 15 years.